I know Chairman Barnes was here as well. Chairman Barnes, thank you. Chairman Barnes of the Prince George's Parks and Planning is with us as well. Thank you all again for being here. I'd love to open it up. Panelists, y'all look good. Thank you for being here. Rodney, I would love to start with you for our first question. You know, we framed this panel, this event around livability. That can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And so I'm curious, talk to us about your research in livability. And then based on your research, right, as you think about the Blue Line corridor, what are some opportunities to help create a more livable corridor?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's an important one. And thank you and LISC for organizing, and thank all of you for coming here today. Livability is an important concept for AARP and myself. We define it as communities that have the housing options, the transportation options, the supportive community features and services, the things that people need to be able to stay in their communities, to thrive in those communities, and have a higher quality of life. And so one of the things we did is we created a livability index, and it measures every neighborhood in the country across 7 different categories of livability, things like housing and transportation, and things having access to things in the neighborhood that are strong for folks, healthcare, education, opportunity, and the like. And one thing I found from that work is that every community has assets and every community has challenges. And the question is, what can communities do to improve on the challenges that they have using the assets that they have, right? So in this region, we've got metro stations. That's a huge asset to build from. We've got highways with people coming to and fro, tens of thousands of cars a day. We've got strong organizations, this church, LISC, and other organizations that are strong in this region as well. But there's also challenges. We have the Congressman Ivey talked about some of those challenges already. That we've got some of the challenges from the federal workforce changes. We've got, frankly, some safety challenges out there on the roads and the like. We have a lack of some of the places that community members can come together and thrive and connect with, right? And access to healthy foods, so many things that could be improved. And the question is, if we're going to talk about development, if we're going to talk about change in the community, what are the things that we can do with the assets we have to address some of the challenges that we have? So livability to me is a whole path to trying to make the communities better for the residents that are here today and hope they can thrive today and tomorrow.
That's great. Thank you, Rodney. And that's a perfect segue into Tracy. I'd love to bring you in as, the county executive's leader on all things economic development. Talk to us about, right, how you're looking at building on the incredible strengths of this corridor to create a more livable community for everybody.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So the county understands the importance of supporting and sustaining all of the beauty about the Blue Line Corridor is so many coalitions, from the Blue Line Corridor Coalition and their assurance that the residents of this community are heard as we spend these $400 million in state funding. You have the 20743, the landmark alliance between the mayors of Seat Pleasant, Fairmont Heights, and Capitol Heights. And then you have, of course, LISC, who's going to ensure, again, that the residents of this community are heard and that their desires and wants are incorporated into the planning. And so what the county would do is continue to support these organizations to ensure that their initiatives are funded when we can fund it, and that we are listening to the work that they do, their work product that is generated from their efforts, and we can incorporate that into our leverage and incentivizing development, into our community benefits agreements. So the work that these coalitions do will help us to incentivize developers to include their desires. With respect to the manufacturing piece, yeah, we're moving away from a development here and a development there to a unified, centralized, mixed-use communities where people can work, live, and play. But that doesn't mean that there's not room for the manufacturing component. As a matter of fact, they're at 6135 Central Avenue, the Berman Enterprises development. There's 775 1,000 square feet of industrial use, which will mainly be for warehouse and distribution. But components like that feed the work element of the work, live, and play, and will create jobs for the residents who remain here, as well as the future residents who will come to the Blue Line Corridor. And so we also want to stay in lockstep and in support with our current manufacturing, like Blue Henry's and their beverage garnishments, and AW Industries and their mattress manufacturing businesses just outside the Blue Line Corridor. So while we want to live, work, and play in dense communities rich with amenities and destination components, but the manufacturing piece will remain an important part of the equation as they bring jobs. And then finally, with respect to the faith-based community, this is a component. I mean, faith-based organizations are the bedrock of any given community's character, and we want to continue to support those types of entities. There are programs that we have developed to incentivize and help them to develop their aging properties into mixed-use developments. And so all of these different factions, we will continue to support. We will continue to fund as much as we can in order that the Blue Line Corridor is not only an amenity for future residents, but that the current residents' voices are heard and their desires and wants are incorporated into the programming for the Blue Line Corridor.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. And I think a key part of this vision for the Blue Line is engaging the development community. And so, Joel, so thrilled to have you with us, right? It's one of the great parts of LISC work, as well as being able to both work with community and work with mission-driven developers like Dante's partners. And so, Joel, I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about, from the development lens and developer lens, what are you seeing as key opportunities in this Blue Line Corridor, and what types of kind of tools and collaborations are helpful from a mission-based developer to help bring some of this vision into fruition?
Sure. I would like to echo everyone on the panel and say thank you for having us here. It's been truly a pleasure. As a Black-owned developer based in DC, we have been around in the community for several years, over 20 years, building affordable housing communities. And we really value is that the Blue Line Corridor offers a great opportunity for transit-oriented development and mixed-income developments. And it really comes down to three main items that I think we should focus on to really incentivize and galvanize the communities along the Blue Line Corridor. One of those is public-private partnerships, and that's really critical to getting the work done and aligning with the county, with transit agencies, with the city agencies, as well as private developers, such that you're aligned in how we're pushing forth the products and the opportunities along the corridor. The other thing is also having flexible funding and innovative funding. I think there's a lot of sources and opportunities out there, but having the ability to leverage all those sources together. So you have funding and support from the county through tax pilots, through grants, through other initiatives and funds. And then you have levels of funding and support from the state as well. And all of those really kind of come together to create the opportunity for the community to, as Tracy said, to live, work, and play. And I think the last piece and most important piece is community engagement and really being involved in the community, understanding where the community's alignments are such that those values are really incorporated into the thread of what you're trying to put together. And just really at the bottom line is having all of those three, from the financing for the partners, public-private partnerships, and the community engagement, are really integral in putting together some of the communities that will be forthcoming among the development of the Blue Line Corridor.
Thank you, Joel. And Brittney, coming to you, we've often talked about how many different hats you wear.
Right.
You're a resident, obviously a key member of this church, a planner, a researcher. And I think in our conversations, we've often talked about how communities, particularly Black communities, have so often been acted upon. And for me, so much of your work, as I see it, is helping bring power to communities to tell their own story. And so as someone deeply connected to this area, how would you describe the story of the communities that make up the Blue Line Corridor? And tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing to help pursue a more livable corridor.
Yeah, no, Brian, thank you so much for that question. And it's a loaded question, right? If I had to describe it, so pending, right, dissertation, thank you, Rodney, for all of your support with that as well. It would be land, labor, and legacy, right? So how do we think about this corridor? And I believe Congressman Ivey, definitely brought some of that up around just the history of how land has been used in this particular community. Tracing back to plantations, right? Thinking about the Concord plantation, thinking about the history of formerly enslaved individuals who started to build their own communities, right? So when we talk about giving people back their power or versus reminding people of the power that already exists within them and the legacy that has been left behind of ways in which they can come back to invest in their communities, I would say for me, that's part of the story. So whether that's the Ridgely community or the Ridgely family, whether that's my own family, right? My third great grandfather, who was a farmer off of Sheriff Road, owned property and built several homes for his family, for them to be able to live, right? So I think that's one aspect of it is land, labor, and legacy. And then if I think about, well, what is some of the work that we're doing? Of course, it's the work that we're doing here at the church in supporting this very vital and crucial anchor institution and helping them reimagine 17 acres, right? If you had access in 2015, prior to Pastor Ron being here, if we thought about using this space to build 100 housing units, that question probably wouldn't have come up, right? If we thought about taking this 13,000 square foot facility and putting on a green roof, upgrading the solar panels and making this a net zero facility that can support future generations, that conversation may not have come up. So for us here, some of the work that we're doing is, one, intentionally the work here. But as you mentioned, Brian, I wear multiple hats, right? So I also serve on the state's, last year I was appointed to the state's Affordable Housing Trust. So now also thinking about, we have a $50 million approximately affordable housing trust at the state. I'm always curious about how many developers or how many organizations in Prince George's County, particularly along the Blue Line, who are actually applying for that fund. So part of that work is also making sure that people are aware of what resources are available to support them. And then finally, not finally, but one of the things that's most important and really near and dear to my heart is supporting some of the local businesses. So Tracy, you mentioned Blue Henry. Adrian actually started, so Blue Henry, Adrian is one of our, is the CEO. She actually started at the Capital Market and vended at the Capital Market. She's currently serves as one of our board members. And then Baked by Bina. How many people enjoyed the delicious pastries? I want to see everybody saying this. Mr. Bina is actually one of the businesses that we work with at the Capital Market. So helping small local businesses, local farmers find the resources and assets that they need to be able to leverage. Because we already have so many great things happening here in the corridor. And our job, or at least what we see our role as, is how do we help to amplify that and help to really push people a little bit to really make it happen.
So good. Thank you, Brittney. And I love that. I think that's at the very center of our hopes, really, because of the Capital Markets mission and LISC mission of the Blue Line Corridor Coalition, right? There is so many assets, small businesses, cultural histories here. So how can this platform be used to build on those? I want to pause for 1 second just because I forgot to mention at the beginning. If you all do have questions for the panel, there are note cards at the end of each row. Please write those down. And I've got a few folks in the back with BLCC t-shirts on. They can grab those, and we'll make sure to get those in front of the panel as well. I want to ask one more question for our panelists, and then we will open up to some of those questions written on note cards. So panelists, when one mentions developments and transit-oriented development in particular, I think especially in this region, we can't ignore the trauma of so much displacement that we've seen in the district and the surrounding areas. And so I just want to name that and invite you all into conversation with each other about it, right? Because I think what we heard from our congressman, from our council chair, is that there's a commitment on the county level, there's a commitment on the community level that this is different, right? That when we see cranes in the sky, the worry isn't, oh, am I gonna be able to afford to stay here? But that we can do both. We can help make sure folks have the right to stay here and bring new amenities. And so I'm curious, I would just love to ask, right, as you all think about transit-oriented development, do you see it as an antidote or accelerant, or maybe a little bit of both? And how do we collectively, those of you all on the panel, but those of us in the room, carve out a different path than we've seen in other parts of the region? Really light question.
I'll go first. So, look, if the prospect of gentrification is real. While the county is doing, has several initiatives, like our right of first refusal program, where we have the right, before an apartment building is sold, the county has the right to elect to purchase it, which would mean there are, significant savings in its development or its redevelopment. So that keeps costs down so that we can have more affordable housing. We also have the initiative to have 75% affordable housing in the Blue Line Corridor, meaning housing that is limited or restricted to residents who make no more than 75% of the average median income in the area. But the fact is, with development, increases in real property taxes is going to come because the value of the property surrounding these developments is going to rise, and the state will come and assess those values. So my main concern is with the small businesses who have to maintain their businesses with rising real property taxes. And to be honest, hey, I've been in this position for 4 months. I'm having a ball. But this is one of the tough issues that has to be addressed, and we have to be creative in how we make sure that these small businesses can afford to stay here where they've built and provided services and goods to this community while we develop and bring in more prosperity to the area. So it's a conundrum, it's a challenge, and over time, I hope we can find creative ways to work with the state and the county to minimize any displacements and any loss of property due to tax deficiencies.
And I'll echo that to say that, it can be an antidote if you're leveraging those resources early, right? And you're locking in that affordability, you're locking in a lot of the alignment of incentives and funding resources, earmarking the developments that before the actual market gets there. Because once the market gets there, you really don't have you have less kind of impact on what happens. So locking in that early and working with your partners and the resources that you have such that you are able to really, it becomes an accelerant for growth and not an accelerant for, the as you said, the antidote for what you're doing.
Well, part of locking it in early is from the beginning, having a vision on the people in the community, how they're impacted today and how they're impacted tomorrow. And also, as we've alluded to today, having the partners in place that can make that happen, that can kind of achieve the vision that we're having. And when I look around the country at places that have done this well, there are places where from the beginning, there's a vision of not development for development's sake, but development in ways that improve the lives of the residents who are there. They're participating in the process. Their organizations are helping, political leadership's helping. And I'm seeing some of those pieces today, actually, which makes me very hopeful for the future of this region. But there's also the other dynamics at play. Brittney alluded to the fact that I also did a dissertation about Prince George's County, and one of the things that really came to me about the history of the county, to some of the points we're talking in the intro, are, and Glenn got in this as well, that the county's history has put it in a position where over many years that, this is the least developed county in the region. The metro stations we have here are the least developed metro stations, which means A, there's more land around these metros that can become something, but B, that process over decades has led to some approaches to development that were just, let's get whatever is coming. Let's get the thing that's the shiny thing that's in front of us, and not necessarily the kind of development that would benefit everybody and today and tomorrow, and look at the community as a whole. And so my hope is that there is a vision, the kind of vision we're talking about today, that's accepted widely, of creating the kind of community that addresses some of those challenges I mentioned earlier, and works with people that are here. That to me is the recipe, the secret to trying to fight the negative effects of gentrification, but having the benefits of the growth that can help the people in the community.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would certainly echo all the comments that have been brought up here today, and also center the conversation in, if we're talking about, is transit-oriented development an accelerant or is it an antidote, right? I think what I'm really hearing is that it depends, and it also is about the level of intentionality that we're putting either in the forefront as we're starting to plan and prepare for our communities or the future. Or it's something that if we think about, there's like a certain fulcrum, right? And right when you hit that fulcrum, there's a tipping point. And when that tipping point happens, then the conversation around affordability becomes very challenging. Tracy, I really appreciated your comments around small business support, right? And how do we also think about supporting small businesses in these conversations around gentrification? Oftentimes, we primarily focus on residents, which is important, right? But we have a lot of small businesses in the corridor, and a lot of them are also talking about the conversations of, well, what happens to me? One of the great examples, and even thinking about transit-oriented development, Bryan, are just concepts around how do we even think about ownership models for like local businesses. So with the mini plaza where that Gallery 47 is that you mentioned earlier, the fact that that is a condo association allows them to have a little bit more ownership over what happens in their future. So when we talk about even with the Blue Line Corridor Coalition, thinking about aspects of ownership around home ownership, protections for seniors, and thinking about how they might transfer titles, right? We're going through that with my family now. How there's a land or there's an asset and now we don't know what to do next or how to actually navigate that. So even those are critical aspects of it. And one of the things that we see at the capital market, or at least the framing that we try to use, is transit-oriented development and also food-oriented development. So food is at the center of everything that we do. And in recognizing that historically in the United States, at least our argument is that the development and design of our communities has been greatly impacted by slavery and in how plantations were built and what slavery looked like as an institution and what agriculture looked like as an institution. So our strategy is to think about, well, how do we incorporate and embed food into every single thing that we do to help to build some of those livable communities? Whether it's about ensuring that there's housing for a person who works at McDonald's or housing for a farm worker, whether it's about ensuring that there's adequate transportation for my TCM ambassadors to come to safely cross Central Avenue, right, when they're coming here. Those are all the things that I think is critical for us to be intentional. And then earlier, Chair Orieva mentioned about what's at stake. And what I think is really helpful for me to even frame this as what's at stake for our communities is 16 years. 16 years is a life expectancy difference between people who live in communities like ours in the Blue Line versus people who live in Greenbelt and College Park. So if you can think somebody who lives in this community has a 16-year life expectancy that is shorter than other people. So there's a lot at stake for us as well.
Yeah. Wow. 16 years. Wow. Maybe to keep building off that, because Rodney, I think this is where a lot of your work comes in, right? 16 years. What, again, maybe to bring it back to this idea of livable and healthy, right? When you hear that, what are some things that come to mind as, again, how do we, I don't know, there's no quick solutions, but are there any best practices? Are there what are some things that you've seen across the country to help improve that life expectancy, improve access to health?
Yeah, the disparity in this region has some of the biggest disparities in life expectancy anywhere. And if you look at our index, you can see on a map just how different that is. And frankly, we don't even get it to Montgomery County and how high life expectancy is there compared to this here on the eastern side of the region. And so there's a couple of things that are associated with high life expectancy. Access to healthy foods, exercise opportunities, things you might expect, safe roads and that kind of thing, impacting accidents and accidental death. There are also some things you might not think about that are associated, things like education, access to income, access to some of the resources that are there as well. And so one of the things for me is, what can we do to bring some of the resources that high life expectancy communities have into communities that have lower life expectancies? So getting more grocery stores, frankly, more, and it may sound weird, but more libraries and places where people can connect. there's a whole range of things we can do that kind of bring the connection to people, the actual direct impact on health and health. By the way, we're in a health professional shortage area here. We don't have enough doctors and other ways of getting your health care taken care of in this part of the region. So again, there are things we can do directly, but there are also things we can do to build a community fabric that help support people as they grow as well. So kind of the direct and indirect answers there, I'd say.
That's great. I really appreciate that. And I think one partner I'll shout out, I think Adenia Bradley of Mission of Love Charities is here, and they are a key partner. I know one of the things that they're doing in this new facility that they're building is partnering with the Greater Baden Medical Services because they've seen that need for additional health care in this corridor. And so really, really excited about that. And then, Rodney, I want to pick up on another theme that you hit and ask the rest of the panel, because this is a question that came in ahead of the event on Eventbrite as well. And it's this idea of kind of third spaces. So you mentioned libraries, places for people to gather. And the question reads like this: many neighborhoods have lost third spaces, places outside of home and work where residents can gather, build relationships, and strengthen community life. As new developments are planned along the Blue Line corridor, how can planners, the community, developers, and the public sector ensure projects include meaningful public spaces such as community hubs, cultural spaces, and youth centers? And so, Joel, I know that's a big one, but as our resident developer, would love for you to talk about that, and then if others want to jump in as well.
Sure, and we recognize the importance of having spaces to gather in our communities, and one of the things that we do incorporate in as much as possible is spaces in our buildings where you have community rooms or you have community gardens as well as playground or child play spaces. So those are some of the smaller things we can do at a really specific centralized level in our communities. And then there's also, our partnerships that we have with maybe a neighbor or the local county where there's land that we can contribute or not contribute. They can contribute and we can help improve as we're trying to build or adjacent to our communities. So those are some of the ways that we're thinking about spaces and how we're thinking about how we incorporate even land opportunities where you'll have open areas where you can just sit around with any type of pocket parks and things like that. So there's always opportunities. We also look at ways to just incorporate local partnerships. So we'll have farmers market or other local communities and small businesses we'll support and use a lot of times when we're going through construction period before we actually break ground. If there's a vacant land, we can use that as ways to and galvanize some of the local opportunities for the community to come into the site before we kind of start to go into construction. So there's a lot of ways you can bring in ways to work with the community and bring those spaces even after the project is built within the community to support the projects.
I love this topic because the county executive is very intentional of making Prince George's County a destination, a place where you don't just come to visit family or to work, but to vacation, to come. And that's why we have Sphere coming, which is going to make this a very attractive location to visit as a destination, but also understand that, there is Blue Line Corridor. The Blue Line Corridor legislation is matriculating through the House right now. And it is an amendment to the current legislation that brings the $400 million in Blue Line Corridor investment. Right now, that law only allows for a cultural center and an amphitheater. We're amending that legislation to include several placemaking components in the Blue Line Corridor. Where you see Morgan Boulevard is now vacant land by the Morgan Boulevard Metro Station. We've amended the legislation to include a food hall, which is very exciting in that area. In addition to the new Board of Education headquarters, there'll be some mixed-use development, but the placemaking is with the food hall and a sports and innovation technology center where youth can come and see high technical athletic training facilities, study sports medicine, and come outside and hear live jazz music while enjoying quick service food. And so that, and also in that legislation, the amphitheater is still in that legislation. And we are looking to build an amphitheater at the downtown Largo, the former Coraline development where Cap Center at the Boulevard used to be, right there where the hospital is. There will be an amphitheater in that area. And so those components will allow residents to not just live or work on the Blue Line corridor, but to come and enjoy some really fascinating amenities that are in the pipeline.
And just to connect threads here, we had the chairman of the Park and Planning Commission here earlier, and bringing these places together, the kinds of things that we need, also including parks and libraries and things that are under MNC PPC control, and the things that developers can support that we've been hearing about. Again, that goes back to that partnership thing. If we're going to create the spaces that people need and they want to stay in, it includes all of those things. It also, by the way, includes maybe a coffee shop or a restaurant or some kind of thing where a business of the type where people want to engage. It's the art location installation that they were talking about earlier too. Like it's all those things. Give people that variety of things so that you can be where you need to be. It's not like one answer to try to figure out how you can get what people need. You have to have that variety.
Yeah. I mean, and I would also add, in order to sustain that variety, right? Because it's one thing for us to talk about the communities that we want to see. It's another thing to ensure that the infrastructure is there and that as residents, right, we're also encouraging the infrastructure that we want to see. And one of the main things is walkability, right? So if we're looking at the Blue Line corridor, one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we have a, 8-9 lane highway that basically is dividing us. And that basically it restricts our ability to be able to ensure that places are easy for people to access and to make it walkable so that they want to go to, right? Every time we have a new drive-through, it makes it difficult for people to safely navigate the community to be able to get those resources to casually, right? So a livable community, a community that has third spaces, is a community where I can easily get there, right? If I have to go there and it takes me 20, 30 minutes to pack up the kids in the car, it's a little bit more challenging for me to do that. I want to shout out Kyle Reeder, who's also one of our co-organizers with the Capital Market, who just walked in, who has been really strongly thinking about what would it look like for us to do a 5K or for us to do a marathon along the Blue Line corridor, right? To think about how our community can transform to create that as a third space of people weekly. I mean, in DC at Union Market, District Running Collective brings out maybe about 350 people every week. And all they're doing, not all they're doing, but they're like, they're running, right? They're getting together. And that's just something that's so, I won't say it's simple, right? But the difference is that our infrastructure, particularly looking at the road in Central Avenue through State Highway Administration, I would really encourage us, if we want to see more third spaces, let's go talk to State Highway Administration, go pick it, go to whatever kind of meeting that they have in Annapolis to really encourage that we have the designs of our community, particularly looking at the street infrastructure that makes it safe, right? So that young kids who are coming from, or high school students who are coming from Central High School, they're not, or teachers aren't being impacted by pedestrian fatalities because they're having to figure out how to navigate that route. So I would toss up the idea of walkability, safe streets, sidewalks, wide sidewalks, trees, all those things.
And one quick thing on that too, though, is we talk about, we may go to the Wendy's or the McDonald's or the Dunkin' Donuts, what have you, but the reason why there's so many drive-throughs is those are designed to appeal to the tens of thousands of cars that are going through all day. That's why the streets are wide and hard to cross and almost impossible if you're an older adult to get across safely. But they're designed for the cars going past, not for the community resident that's
Correct.
walking in there. And so thinking about, again, the residents as we develop that's important.
And I'll add to that, one of the things that we try to pull into a lot of our communities is resident services. So we work with a lot of specific organizations that are championing community opportunities, as well as galvanizing the voice of the community, so that when we're organizing and programming our spaces, we have ideas, we know what the community wants. We have even just, from a more less tangible as sidewalks, but more like financial literacy classes, other educational opportunities, home ownership opportunities, things like that, and just bringing those programs and events to our communities and within our communities, so that you're not just a place where you're sleeping and going back to work. You actually create community and placemaking inside the community with your neighbors and neighbors within the space.
And I want to pause for a second on that, on this piece, this walkability piece. 'Cause I think so often when you're talking about the transition of an entire corridor, there's a lot of questions about what's something that I can do. Here is something that everyone in this room can do. The State Highway Administration, which is the manager of Central Avenue, is currently conducting a safety assessment on Central Avenue. They've done a little bit of community engagement. From the perspective of the Blue Line Corridor Coalition, I'm looking at Brittney, and she can correct me if I misspeak here. The proposed changes to make Central Avenue more safe that they have suggested are not enough. And so there's something that you all can do is reach out or visit bluelinecc.org and send a letter to the administrator of the State Highway Administration and tell him that we need a safer Central Avenue. And that is something that the coalition, that capital market, that LISC, that our partners would love to support in. I want to transition. We've got some really good questions that have come in from the audience. And there's two on this idea of preservation. And so I want to transition to those. And I'll ask both, and if folks want to jump in, please do. So one, and this is both a very technical and heartfelt question. So I'm not sure if we'll have the technical ability to answer some of it, but I think we'll be able to speak to some of the heart of it. This says that I live in Rolling Ridge, a neighborhood just around the corner of 130 beautiful brick homes. And a number of these homes are slated for rezoning, making them non-conforming. And so the question is that I think there's both a technical question of what does that mean for us? And I would say that part of what we can help do is connect you to the planning department to make sure that those questions are answered. But it's also getting to this question of how do we help ensure that this beautiful Rolling Ridge community that has been a bedrock of a neighborhood can stay, and that those neighbors can stay and thrive. And so we've got that question, that's number one. And then question number two is sort of more broadly about preservation and land preservation. And it says, are community land trusts a part of the BLCC visions or the county's vision for affordable housing? So we'd love to open those up to the panel. Feel free to jump in on either one.
So I'll jump in on the tough first one then, which is first a non-conforming use question. So when we're changing zoning, generally speaking, the idea is that we have the current residents will be grandfathered and have an exception so that you can keep your house, that you could make additions if necessary, and the like. But the idea is that the zoning changes in a way that better looks at that future piece. So to me, the goal is that we have communities that are solid for today, but as development happens into the future, it can be of a type we're talking about that works for the community and that's shaped that takes advantage of closest to metro and all of those things that I think a lot of community members support. That gives flexibility for the future development that's coming down the line. But homeowners usually are and should be preserved in their ability to stay in their communities.
Yeah, and with respect to the conservation aspect, the county zoning ordinance has baked in tree conservation elements that require either preservation of forestry or replacement in other locations. One little known fact about why there's a lack of development around these metro stations on the Blue Line corridor is all of the easements, federal easements, tree conservation easements, and there's a wetland element that kind of hinders and challenges development. So, but back to the conservation component, our laws, our zoning laws have a component, have elements in them that will help preserve the trees and forestry in general.
Yeah, and I'll also add, so in the county zoning ordinance, there is a zoning category called neighborhood conservation overlay zone, which also provides, if communities it's a process through which you have to apply for that. But there is a way to go through that and then to provide some additional protections for certain types of character of a community. And there's currently one in Mount Rainier. There's also one in historic Greenbelt that applies. And I would also just be curious to maybe do a deeper dive. So I know Bryan said we can do some connection to actually explore the zoning ordinance. So prior to working fully with the capital market, I actually worked for the Prince George's County Planning Department on their zoning ordinance as staffer on the zoning ordinance update. So very familiar with a lot of those things in that code, even though some things have changed, generally familiar with the process, but would certainly love to connect with anyone to actually walk through the code. And that's one of the things that we've done with our Civic Leadership Institute is coming out, helping people pull up the zoning ordinance, pull up your zone, play around with PG Atlas, which is an awesome resource, and really see what things are available.
That's a great plug, because you want to.
Yeah, I was going to say from a preservation of affordability aspect, there are tools at the state level of low-income housing as well as historic tax credits, and those are innovative funding resources that developers like myself can use from maintaining the preservation of the physical spaces in the communities and leveraging new resources to make sure that those communities stay or are preserved their affordability. So that's another, just from the preservation piece for the physical residential. Keeping those residents in their houses as well as keeping those communities without having that displacement happen.
Love that. Yeah, I'll just add maybe a few quick things. One, we do have representatives from the planning department here today. And so there he is, he's raising his hand. He will be tabling at the resource fair. And so if you are in Rolling Ridge, would invite you to ask him and have a conversation with him. And then the other thing I wanted to mention on the topic of land trust is I do know Councilmember Eric Olson has actually created a task force on this exact topic. Had the pleasure of sitting on it. And we've been imagining together of what would it look like to create a land trust in Prince George's County. And so that report will be released and presented to the full council later this year. And so I know that is part of this as well, and that we have, we're looking forward to digging into that. I want to ask maybe one last audience question, and then we'll turn to our quick closing question. We have gotten a few questions around youth. How can we support youth with employment opportunities? How can youth be more involved in shaping the future of the corridor? And how can we support young families who want to move into a place like Prince George's County? And so, employment, housing preservation, shaping the future, bringing in new families, wide range there. But again, we'll just invite the panel to reflect on kind of any of those topics.
I would say, right, a lot of times I hear people of all ages talk about they want to support youth. But when youth come to the table, let me not just call me. When young people come to the table, right, and they tell us what they want, sometimes we check out. Right? And we're not fully present, or we want them to be able to present to us in a certain kind of way and not actually go through the process of actually like learning and being their own individuals. We want them in their final state. And so as we're looking at what are things to support young people in Prince George's County, right? I think the first thing is actually just being present and showing up in a way that provides them provides them with resources and opportunities that are important and impactful for them, right? So I do note that Chairman Barnes, Prince George's County Planning Board Chairman Barnes, has a youth advisory council, which has been phenomenal. I've heard amazing things from the young people there, right? Some of the things that we've been doing with the capital market and how do we actually get young people thinking about planning in their future is we do a thing called healthy food walk audits, where we actually have them go out and assess their neighborhoods, look at what are the issues, what is it like for them to be in their community, and then we actually have them plan and redesign what their neighborhoods look like based off of that feedback, and then we take that as policy recommendations and we advocate to or work with the planning department, work with other community organizations or county organizations to try to elevate that. So I think it's really important about showing up for them and to a certain extent removing ourselves and truly like listening. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things in our livability index that we give places credit for is being more multi-generational. And I think what we're getting at with all the things you listed in your question is that are we truly being multi-generational with the approaches that we're taking? Are we bringing youth to the table? Are we bringing on families? Are we bringing working professionals? Are we bringing older adults? All of those folks have to be part of it. And when we decide that we're going to build this or that and it's going to be here or there, if we have all of the input from all of those groups, the trick to me is that gives us the secret sauce in making sure that whatever we develop is going to work for us today and tomorrow, which is a theme you've heard me mention a couple of times. If we only take things that work for working professionals, let's say, that those folks may have their needs met, but the youth are left out, the older adults are left out, and so the community stagnates. Right? So the idea of bringing everybody in is crucially important. And so you gave an example of how to do that. And we really need to think about that, being multi-generational throughout the process and involvement in the delivery of what we're creating in the community.
And speaking of seniors, there are so many families and elders that have raised their children here, lived here all of their lives, and now we're reaching a point where they can't afford to stay. And so we have to be intentional on making sure that our seniors can age in place, here where they raise their families, here where their children and grandchildren live, and we have to do that through affordable housing for our seniors.
That's right.
Yeah, that's so good. I know we have folks from Prince George's Department of Housing and Community Development who can talk about some of the tax supports that are already in place for seniors, but that is certainly a huge focus of the conversation that we're having and needs to continue to be had. I would love to transition to our closing question, which is this. Let's pretend for a moment we're back here 10 years from now. 2036, we're all back in this room. There's 100 new affordable housing units on the campus. So beyond the 100 new affordable housing units on the campus, Brittney, for each of our panelists, just give us rapid fire answers. What is one noticeable difference in the Blue Line corridor that you would love to see?
Do you want us to go in any order?
Joel, let's just start here down the line.
I would say the one thing I would say is placemaking, and then the community is a really the Blue Line Corridor is a place where folks really truly can live and work and play, and it's wrapped up within all the projects that we have talked about over the last 10 years.
Okay, and for me, and I'm sorry, but I have to get a shout out to my professionals here, my economic development team members. Perry Pillar, Executive Director of the Redevelopment Authority, please stand. Jonathan Butler, the Executive Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD. And then Howard Way is the newest member of our Economic Development team in the County Executive's Office. Howard, can you stand up? He comes to us from having been the Executive Director of the Redevelopment Authority, working for WMATA, and now he's here with us, and he has hit the ground running and doing an absolute fabulous job. I want to see a lot of things, not just one. I want to get on a bicycle with 2 or 3 grandkids on the Central Avenue Connected Trail, ride it up to the food hall market at Morgan Boulevard, have a couple of bites to eat, and then see a sign saying the Beyonce concert at the amphitheater is sold out. She'll be 50-something, so it'll fit.
Good to know Beyonce will still be going strong then. For me, one thing I'll say first is that I hope to see development and conservation at the same time. That the idea that a community that stagnates, if 10 years from now we don't have that, this community will be stagnating and worse off than it is today. And so someone asked a question earlier about preservation and the like. And to me, I think sometimes people get caught up in, well, let's make sure I can keep what I have. But communities are changing. And so I've talked to so many people who've moved, who've stayed in a community over time, seen change happen, but didn't take advantage or didn't figure out how to make their community or the change work for them. And so my hope is that 10 years from now, we'd come back, see a community that's got growth around the metro, that's got places that we can walk and be safe, that we can get the healthy food and be able to engage in the parks and the like, and that there would be a range of housing options that works for people of all ages, all income levels in the community, and that the whole development would work for the folks that are here, not just the folks passing through.
I would say first, I want to see Baked by Bina. So we see her have her own coffee storefront, right, in the neighborhood. I want to see where we have Addison Plaza today, we have a new grocery store. And not just any grocery store, a grocery store that's locally owned, that's supplied by local farmers, local food businesses who are infusing their own resources and their own baked goods, fruits and vegetables, and all amazing kind of things that are grown right here in Prince George's County and made right here in Prince George's County is being sold in our community. I think that would be, for me, one aspect of the vision. As Tracy mentioned, I want to see people running. Yeah. I want to see that 5K marathon on the Central Avenue Connector Trail. Yeah. I want to see people of all ages here hanging out, and people who feel like they are choosing to move in the Blue Line corridor. Not just they're living here because it's the best, it's the most affordable place, or I want it to be affordable, but they are choosing to build their families, and they're making an active choice in that, and not just a choice that is a default choice for them.
So good. Can we give the panel as a whole a round of applause? We are wrapping up, and I want to do so with a quick story. I woke up this morning, and my 5-year-old, who, if you were here with us setting up, you would have seen her running circles around the pews yesterday, came and started crying because she was like, "Daddy, I don't want you to leave today." And I'm in the middle of the daddy's getting a lot of love right now. I'm loving it. But I mentioned her because my 5-year-old is the product of myself and my wife. My wife is from St. Kitts and Nevis, born and raised a small island in the Caribbean. I grew up in the suburbs of Colorado, in a community where I never saw panels like this. I was never in rooms like this. And so when we decided where to raise our daughter, Prince George's County was the perfect place. Prince George's County built on the shoulders of folks like Mr. Edwards, who we heard about earlier, of the Ridgely Gray family that we heard about earlier. This is a special, special place. And what I hope you're getting from today is a commitment from your sitting congressman, from your county leadership, from a range of partners, from this entire Blue Line Corridor Coalition, to help ensure that as change comes, because it is coming, it comes in a way that represents, that honors, that amplifies, that lifts up exactly what makes Prince George's County so special. And so our invitation to you today is to continue to get involved. It's to stop by the resource fair. It's to log on at bluelinecc.org and sign up for one of our working groups. And it's to help us shape this inclusive, thriving, resilient Blue Line corridor that everyone deserves. Cool? Thank you so much for being here. Please stop by the resource fair on the way out.
All right, by the way.